Hi, it's me, the bartender, here in Bartender Studios. It's a garage filled with shit. Don't tell anybody. Anyway, I was once asked a question, yo, and I was like, hey. And they're like, yeah. I was like, woo. And that was pretty much the conversation. But I was asked once, do I wish Sega was still making consoles? Now, I wasn't asked specifically like that, but roundabout that was basically the core of the question. And I gave a quick answer, but I kind of wanted to get an in-depth answer because just my personal feelings, and well, sometimes you have to let the personal feelings out. Anyway, so I've been a fan of Sega since the Sega Master System. Now, if you don't know what that is, something's wrong with you. Sega Master System competed with the Nintendo. Now, Nintendo obviously won that generation war because it had more third-party support. But Sega had quite a few games for the Sega Master System that are noteworthy. The graphics on the system were, I think, a little bit better than Nintendo, more colorful. Of course, that's because what's underneath the hood of the system. So that's a graphical and, well, the dynamics of the system I'm not going to get into. But anyway, I've been a fan since the 8-bit generation. Growing up Sega, I also loved the Genesis. Of course, why wouldn't I love the Genesis? It had such awesome titles like Sonic and Kid Chameleon and Comic Zone, Outrunner, a piss poor port of Outrunners. Didn't like that version of it. Gotta have the arcade. And just Vector Man, the balls, green balls. And I could just keep going. Castlevania Bloodlines. Even though Castlevania goes, you know, different system, different games, I loved Bloodlines for the Sega Genesis. Hell, I even like Pebble Beach Golf Links, and that's a golf game. Because do. Well, it was like the music that you heard when you started the game. Awesome. Still stuck in my head. So, as you can tell, I'm running through the generations here. Now, Genesis was battling Super Nintendo. It was kind of like a Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Needless to say, if you're growing up a gamer in the early 90s, it was awesome. Some people might be watching it and they're spoiled by the PlayStation 2s and their Xbox 360s, but coming up the way I did, it's great to be a gamer. It was wonderful. Then Sega came out with the 32X and the Sega CD and then the Nomad, and that's when Sega started coming down. Like, it reached a height with the Genesis, but then started like falling. Now, the Sega Nomad was a portable system for the Sega system. Sega, well, system as far as the company, it was a portable. It produced great graphics, better than the Game Boy, but here's the problem. Battery support for it was like terrible. Like, you'd put batteries in there, fresh batteries, they'd be dead in like a day. But the Game Boy, you can like literally leave that on for days, and I think that was one of the main issues why that system kind of crashed. Of course, you know, marketing and all the technological stuff as far as the business means of the system and how to get it out there to the public probably played a very critical role, but I think the battery life was a big issue with the system. Sega CD, of course, was an add-on, and when that first came out, it was quite expensive. Not that many good Sega CD games out there, honestly. Sonic CD is an awesome game. You got your Lunar and the sequel, Eternal Blue. And there is just, like, this entire screen, we'll say it's a Sega CD library. This corner right here is like the good titles. Everything else is crappy. Sega 32X didn't have that many games come out for it, and, well, needless to say, that system failed too. But it did look cool on top of this system. Well, actually, if you had the original Genesis, like the big generation, first generation system, with the first generation Sega CD underneath, and the 32X on top, you had a system that looked mean. Like I said, that was like the downfall. Sega Saturn comes out, competes with the PlayStation on a CD-based system, hardware, console, boom, 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 war. It's war. And Sony literally comes out of nowhere and just wipes the whole the whole system up. It just knocks it out. PlayStation becomes number one. And Sega came out with the Saturn. Didn't really tell anybody about it. It was just like, you walk in the store like, I would like to buy a, what's that? It's a Sega Saturn. Sega Saturn? Never heard of it. It just came out. I never heard of it. How much? It's a lot of money. Okay, well, I'll get that game for a PlayStation. Give me Gex. I love that game. Lizards. Guy goes, whatever Gex was. Anyway, Sega Saturn comes out with little knowledge to the public that it came out. And it did terrible. Of course, this is when PlayStation was kicking ass, taking names. It was the mature system. Nintendo couldn't evolve from the cartridge-based systems. They were just stubborn with their mind process, and up until recently they actually converted over to CDs. But Nintendo, coming out of the 16-bit era, could have continued to be number one. And they lost a lot of third-party support because they would not transfer cartridge to CD-based media, and that was a problem for developers. That's why Nintendo lost a lot of their support. And PlayStation was the more mature system with more mature games. Of course, when I was growing up, I saw a commercial for Final Fantasy VII, and that made me buy this PlayStation, and man, I love the shit out of that system. We're back on Sega here. So Sega Saturn plummets. Lots of good ports. Of course, you get them at the PlayStation, but there were some titles that were exclusive to the system. Working Design made a bunch of games for Sega Saturn, and by a bunch I mean like I'd say a little bit less than a dozen. And the Sega Saturn had some great exclusive content. Overseas it did great with fighters, 2D fighters. They had the RAM cart and made graphics better, of course, sped up the process of the frame rate. Bada boom boom boom. Sega Saturn failed. Now after this, like this little hump in the road, you have the Dreamcast. $99.99, people. That's when the Dreamcast came out, and when I got the Dreamcast, whew, it was amazing. I tell you what, I love that system. I still do. Here's the problem. I remember getting it. I got two games. It was like Sonic Adventures and Ready to Rumble. Sonic Adventures didn't even work. Out of the box, brand new, it did not work. There was a problem with the production run, and you had to send in and get the game, blah, 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 whatever. Ready to Rumble, same thing, had issues. That's developers, though, not the system itself. So, personally, for me, I saw like a little stumble in the road. And the Dreamcast had some great exclusive content. Unfortunately, the Dreamcast lost. And people wonder why. Well, because the PlayStation 2 came out and it had the DVD player built into it. Of course, being a consumer, you would think, oh, gaming system, DVD player, 2-in-1, boom. And that was the problem. Another problem for Dreamcast was it was ridiculously easy to just get games and download them off the internet, burn them onto a CD and play them. A lot of privacy issues. And that led to the demise of Sega as a console maker, in my eyes. Well, going by the data I read into, because I find the history and the events of video gaming to be interesting. So, with the privacy issue and the direct competition with a system that had a DVD playback, that led Dreamcast to, it was literally going up the hill. It was like the little internet could. Sega could have got out of that, just that lump of hole of shit that they were in, but they couldn't do it. PlayStation 2, of course, you see the legacy there. Amazing games for that system, and there's amazing games for Dreamcast. Like I said, a lot of exclusive content from Sega was released, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. Now, people make systems basically for their own support of their own games. Like Nintendo. To buy Zelda or Mario or Metroid, you need to buy a Nintendo console, because you're not going to get it on any other system. CDI. Well, that was back yonder. And they weren't even developed by Nintendo. But anyway, for Sega to sit there and make a system is kind of a redundant question. It's not a redundant. I mean, people like love Sega, but the fact that they're a great developer is something that has followed them throughout their process as far as a game company, from the 8-bit system, 16, 32, Dreamcast. And that's why I think Sega is better off as a developer of games. Because if you're an owner of a 360, you can play a game made by Sega. If you're an owner of a PS3, you can play that same game, cross-platform. So Sega is a better company as a developer of software instead of hardware, because it puts great advantage to the gamers. And as I said in many other reviews, gamers is what makes this community of gaming awesome, because we love our games, and that's it. I mean, I'm not a hardcore gamer, I'm a casual gamer, but you would think I'm a hardcore gamer. I mean, look at the shit I got in the back, the arcades and stuff, but games is what matters to us gamers, and Sega makes great games. They make some crappy ones too. Looking at you, Iron Man, you're not that great of a game. You're actually pretty bad. But for the most part, Sega, they make great games. So my hat comes off to you, Sega. Hopefully you'll continue to make great games, and like I said, depending on what system you have, you'll have the option to play these games. Sonic 4 you can play on the Wii, 360, I mean, you can play it on all systems. You don't have to buy a specific system to play Sega games. And that's awesome, because like I said, the development team there that does the software for Sega is awesome. Maybe there'll come a point where there's one system that plays all games, but I doubt that. That's my thoughts on the Sega system. That is my thoughts, my personal growing up views of the system, my love for the system, my admiration for the system, the consoles, and everything that was Sega. So Sega, you're awesome. Sentimental video. And that's it. I'm the bartender. And I pretty much just told you about Sega.